Hi everybody, for those of you who don't know me, my name is Peter Llewellyn. I run the services at medcommsnetworking.com. So information, resources, services, activities and so on for people who work in and around Medcoms, by which I mean medical communications, medical education, medical publishing and the associated businesses. So do go and have a look at medcommsnetworking.com if you've not been there before to see what's going on. One of the things we're doing is lots of webinars, online meetings, and we're capturing them, recording them and putting the recordings into NetworkPharma TV. So again, if you've not seen it already, you've got over 300 videos of various sorts now in NetworkPharma TV and lots of great content. Today, absolutely delighted, we're sort of running a MedComms Forum. There's actually 3 sessions. You'll find them all being well, they'll all be recorded and put into NetworkPharma TV. But this one, James has come along to talk about interactive content and how we can use content functionally. I think I'm not going to go too far with that because I'm going to let James explain what he means by that. But we're going to have a presentation from James, and then we're going to have a bit of Q&A. So audience members, be ready with your questions. James, over to you.
Thank you, Peter. Okay, thank you for the introduction, Peter. For those that don't know me, my name is James Harper. I'm founder and managing director of a company called 28B. And today I'm going to talk to you about functional content for field medical teams. And I'm going to give you a caveat with that straight up front. So we've been working in Veeva and generating content hand in hand with our creative and medcoms agencies for the last 7 years. But it's kind of new for field medical teams. It's the new frontier, if you like, for discussion guides, budget impact models, etc., that are on the Veeva platform that MSLs can use in the field to generate discussions and outcomes with their stakeholders, KOLs, and customers. But what I'm going to do today is take you through a bit of a journey about how Veeva is utilized in that way. Then also, forgive me, I'm going to talk a little bit about the commercial world because that's where the most experience is. And I want to take from that what we can learn and maybe generate some discussion about what we can take from that world to really enhance the activities of MSLs in the field or remotely if they're based out of an office. So that's the goal of today. I do want to give a bit of context of who 28B is because it's important. We're not an agency. We don't do content. We don't do medical writing. We don't have a studio, etc. We were set up, or I set it up when I left the agency world to help those agencies without a strong digital offering to do just digital better. And we did everything from websites to apps. And then, as I say, about 7 years ago, I saw my first Veeva build. And I kind of fell in love with the selling effectiveness side of what we can do with platforms like Veeva. So that's what we do nowadays, is brand teams and medical teams. We support them in doing better. This next slide is not a brag slide, although I'm quite proud of the fact that we've got this range of clients. I'm showing you this because it gives us a very uniquely broad insight into how all of these companies are utilizing functional content for their field teams. A handful of them with their medical teams, and I'll show you some examples of that have been genericized and debadged. But the majority of these are the commercial world. It's the medical, it's the rep teams that are out there. But we have 12 agency partners. We work with 22 pharma clients, and we have access to 14 pharma vaults. And in those vaults, we manage the deployment of the content out to the field teams. So that is a brag slide, but it's really just to reinforce the fact that we've seen a lot over the last 7 years, probably more than most, and I hope that I can bring some of those insights to you today. So this is what I'm going to run through in the next sort of 25 minutes. So what's Veeva in this context? You had a great presentation from John. He threw a lot at you, but there is an awful lot to take in from Veeva. So I'm going to narrow it right down to what I'm talking about so we can have it. It's a bit like when you ask someone, you know, do you use Microsoft? It's like, it's so, you know, it can be used for anything. So I'm going to be just narrowing it down. And then why is functional content? What is functional content and why is it relevant to MedComms? And then what can we learn from the commercial teams? And then I'm going to dive into some actual examples. I am going to share commercial examples with you because they are the most advanced and best illustrate some of the principles I'll be talking about. But I will also then demonstrate what could be seen as appropriate for field medical teams. And then we'll have a discussion. So this is one of my favorite views of the Veeva universe, if you like, and it is from Veeva, hence the copyright and all the rest of it. And probably John's looking at this going, it's out of date, probably is. Veeva moves at speed, and often you get caught out with that. But as you can see, there's these big strands, but you'll see Vault that runs all the way through it. It's like for me, it's kind of the spine of the Veeva offering. And actually, when you look at the end, there's the MedComms and promo maps, which you're all probably used to by now and very much aware of, but you may not realize that the same principle of things that you can upload, comment on, approve, and reference can be used all the way back to clinical trials, regulatory, and quality and manufacturing. So it's really the sort of spine that runs through, and then the CRM, and I'll explain what that means at the top. That's really where we're focusing here on the CRM, CLM, and some of the other aspects that are in there, and then the MedComms and PromoMats. I am not an expert on how you get stuff approved in MedComms and PromoMats. That's our agency partner's job, and I'm quite pleased it is, because we don't have to get involved in it, and I believe it can be quite painful for all kinds of reasons, but mainly, and I think I heard this in the last session, because there's a lot of cooks involved in it, and so it can get quite complicated and messy, and we're protected from that by our wonderful agency partners. In fact, I'm going to narrow it right down to just these three things: CRM, CLM, and MedComms or PromoMats. So you've just had a huge presentation on PromoMats, so I don't have to go into it. I just want to pick out what John said earlier, which is the concept I want to bring in and explore a bit more, which is how it interacts with the CRM and CLM. And you may not be aware of this because it may be just slightly outside of your remit. But the fact that PromoMats can serve content to the CLM, and you saw John referencing that. I'm going to take you through a bit of a journey on that one. So you're very familiar with PromoMats and MedComms. But what's a CRM? And in fact, Veeva have two CRMs, as John says. There's the Promo CRM, which is just called CRM, and then Medical CRM. Now, unfortunately, for us in a way, because we're in the medical world, the word customer's involved in here. But I'm not going to shy away from the fact that we might call them stakeholders, we might call them key opinion leaders, but at the end of the day, they are a customer of ours that we need to engage with. So it's the clues in the title as the customer relationship management. And it's both a strategy and a platform for managing an organization, a pharma company, a brand team's relationships and interactions with customers and stakeholders and potential customers and stakeholders. And its purpose is, whether it be for sales or for influence or in medical, is to move our customers from, I've never met you and I'm unaware of what brand therapy area thing we're talking about, all the way along the adoption ladder to whether a loyal advocate, etc. Now, as I say, you can see this with sales eyes on, or you can see it from a KOL influencer point of view. So that in basic terms is what a CRM is. It's data that you use to understand your customers and to have a better relationship with them. And I think when dealing with medical teams, there's sometimes a feeling that this isn't right, that this is for sales. Well, what a good CRM does for you is to help you understand your customers better so you can meet their needs better. And if I replace the word customer with key opinion leader or stakeholder, it's the same principle. You know, it's about bespoke interactions that suit their needs. So I'll explain that or demonstrate that a bit later on. This one might even stick in the craw even a bit more because it's called CLM, which stands for closed loop marketing, right? And I know we're in the medical world and I know we're talking about science, but at the end of the day, marketing, if we can't remove the word marketing from it, that's what it stands for. But closed loop marketing is where you take the data that's held in the CRM or that comes from things that are used in relationship to the CRM, and you use that data to change that content or change your approach to that customer. So again, if we can take the sort of, oh, this is for sales off, actually it's still appropriate. If we can learn from the interactions we're having with our customers to be even better in how we interact with them, then I think we're okay. So a CLM only really works if you've got a CRM to hold that data and read from it. Okay, I'm going to now explain how this lot works together. So there's Veeva Vault, which we just talked about, PromoMats and MedComms, and John talked about its other continually evolving functionality, the spine of Veeva, if you like. And that's on an Amazon Web Services instance. It's Veeva's own animal, etc. But PromoMats is where you upload a presentation you want your MSLs, or that is going to be used by MSLs in the field. And you've written it and it's become a coded presentation. Let's say we built it for you and we put it up there. and it's approved, right? So it could be an interactive PDF, it could be coded. Now, what Veeva does is it can talk to what we call the CRM. I've referred to that. And you might often hear this from customers or et cetera. It's called the sandbox or the CRM SBX. So what's a sandbox? Comes from the American term for, at least I think it does. John might need to correct me on this one. But it's the playground wooden box that sand goes in. The idea is you can play in that sand without it going everywhere. Right, so sandboxing is like a protected environment where if I mess up, I'm not going to break anything. I'm not going to release non-compliant stuff to reps. So what this CRM SBX happened is where we go to test things. So again, it might be slightly outside your remit, but it's really good to understand how this all works together. In Vault, you'll know that you've got various statuses for material, draft, etc., until it's approved. Now, when it's material that can be distributed, and you move it to staged, that exact presentation is synced to the CRM. And then it's synced from the CRM to the iPad that the rep or the MSL or the field team are using with customers. Now, in this case, sorry, I got that wrong. It's not going to the reps, it's going to test users. So whenever you're in staged, it allows us to test, does this function as expected? Are we getting the analytics we expected, etc. Now, there's CRM production, which is a confusing term for me. Production sounds like we're making it, but actually production means it's produced and or I prefer the word live. So one Vault can speak to a test environment and a live environment. And it's the status of the object or the presentation that dictates where it goes. If I move that to approved because everyone's happy with it, it now syncs to the live CRM, which syncs to the live user's iPad. And now that is out in the wild. So it needs to be, and that's the whole point of the approvals process. But this is what's unique about Vault compared to what Zinc used to be. I think I heard it called data something previously, is Veeva have built this ecosystem that allows this single source of truth. And it's incredibly valuable. It's more compliant than any other solution. Okay, I sound like a Veeva fanboy. I kind of am. There are other solutions out there. But this is the one that I know the best, and it's obviously quite dominant at the moment. Right. So we've now got that presentation that you've carefully written, referenced, got approved, we've coded, put back up into Vault. It's gone through the testing, and now it's out there with the MSLs, and they're using it with customers. When they use it with customers, we get data back. So what slide was shown to what customer? It's kind of interesting, but maybe, and I'm going to show you later about what, that's what an MSL's role is. One of the most important roles for them is intelligence and understanding the needs of customers. So you could be asking a question in this presentation: how many patients in your CCG are impacted by this? And you're gathering that data. Wouldn't that be kind of cool data to collect? So that data goes from the iPad or from the browser into the CRM and is collated there. And then we can use that data either through some built-in Veeva analytics, but if you don't have analytics engines and et cetera, if you don't have that, it can go externally. And at the moment, most clients still sort of take it out into Tableau and other data analysis pieces. Those insights and reporting can go back and influence that content. You might find that there's better, that the customer's responding to one thing over another. So it comes back to you. You're recreating it, you're changing it, you're getting it approved, and you go back through the testing cycle. But the beauty is, because it's single source of truth, you change it once and it's repeated across all of these views because it's a single presentation. So I hope that's helped. That's kind of the whole, what is a CRM and CLM, but it took me a while to get my head around it. But I think it really helps to understand it's a single source of truth document, and the data is really important. That's a simple takeaway from that one. So why is this relevant to you and to field medical teams? So I know we all go on about what happened in 2020. It's very pertinent, but I just want to share some data with you because the landscape has changed. There's a new normal, whatever phrase you want to trot out, but at the end of the day, things have changed. How did we change as an industry? So this is a UK view, well, Great Britain view. This is Veeva Pulse data, public domain now as they published it. And approved emails are compliant emails sent out of the Veeva system. Vast majority is being done by commercial teams, and the same with engage meetings. And I think this data is a mix, but I would guess this is very much commercial team. What we saw was a great response from our industry and a great response from Veeva. I should also say they gave away Veeva Engage licenses to any existing customers. They provisioned, I think, 150,000, 180,000 licenses in like 2 weeks. It was an extraordinary effort. And what that meant is we could stay in touch with our customers, stay in touch with our KOLs and stakeholders. Forgive me if I use customers too much. But the fact that these emails were being sent and we see an average open rate of 28%, and we also see these meetings happening with 29 minutes long, even as soon as June in this year, tells me a really important message. We add value to our HCPs. What we have to say matters, and they value what we have to say. So even during all of this, there was some value we were adding. This is the global view over that same period, January, December in 2020. There was a massive response from our industry. And we mustn't forget the value that we add to our customers, both at our commercial, but especially at a scientific MSL level, the value that they have. So that's what we did. How has our customer done it again? How have our HCPs' expectations changed? This was pre-COVID, long time pre-COVID, 2016, 2017. We used to use this slide all the time. It's from a Cross Health blog. If you're into omni-channel, multi-channel, you've got to pay attention to Across. They're big in this area, got some great data. But even back then, 13% of customers, HCPs that see reps, wanted to see those reps virtually only. So that's 13% of that base. So it shouldn't really have been ignored, but we were very, very slow as an industry to adopt remote engagement. And COVID's driven this sort of crisis accelerated uptake of technology that's really changed this picture. So this is a doctors.net survey, 722 validated members just in that sort of June, March, April, May time last year, as lockdown had hit and we'd realized it's not going to be 2 weeks, it's not going to be 3 weeks, and it was ongoing. How did it change? So you can see here when we focus on the MSLs in secondary care, kind of looks like good news that 75% of our customers do expect post-COVID to see industry representatives, industry MSLs, but that does mean there's 25% that don't at that point. But how's that changed as well? And so here's the overall channel mix. If you're used to channel mixes, is how do these people want to be approached? Pre-COVID, there was still a good chunk in terms of 47% majority face-to-face. The blue in the middle is kind of 50-50 or 60-40, and 34% in the orange was over the internet, essentially. Post-COVID, there's been a significant shift to I'm not sure mix, but quite a jump in the orange, as in remote only. That's the same survey. So I've got more recent data, and I would say more worrying data if you're not yet in the remote space. That is the more recent Accenture survey, similar number of HCPs. 87% of them want to either all or a mix of virtual and in-person meetings. Okay, now I think MSLs have a higher value, right, and stronger relationships. So that's probably not as high as it is for the generic industry contact, but it's still going to be significant. We need to think about things like maybe hospitals just have a blanket ban on any non-patient, non-visitors. Why do we want disease vectors in this environment? So I think it's obvious everything has changed. So how do we need to respond as an industry? And to be honest, the commercial teams responded quite quickly to this, and I'm sure the MSLs have done too, which is, I think we need to enable and empower the multi-channel MSL with the right functional content to orchestrate the correct engagement with their KOLs, HCPs, and stakeholders. So I am doing some research for this. So as you can probably tell from me dropping into language more on the more commercial side, we don't have a huge amount of experience here. It is the new frontier. There is a rapid adoption ongoing at the moment, but it's still really recent. And certainly last 7 years has been, the vast majority has been commercial teams. So I went to the Medical Sciences Liaison Society. I don't know if they're big in the UK, it's a US site, but it helped me understand, what does an MSL do on a day-to-day basis? And I want to pick out these: the KOL relationship, the delivering scientific presentations, gathering insights, and then competitive intelligence gathering. It's one of the breakdown of those. So a CRM and CLM is almost perfectly designed to help them do that. And this is what I see the vision for the multi-channel MSL in the remote space and the face-to-face space. And platforms like Veeva can support all of this, from face-to-face or remote engagement to sending compliant emails or emails that can be tracked because they provide important and insightful analytics. Virtual congresses, I think we've all had experience of those this year, good and the bad. Virtual educational meetings like we're kind of doing right now. There's also driving and direct them to online educational resources, portal hubs, etc. And then this is how Veeva can drive all of this. And it's driven through the CLM, the remote engagement, approved email, but really importantly as well, and I think this is going to be big for MSLs, is dashboards to understand more about their customers, or done it again, more about their stakeholders and key opinion leaders. The reason being is the better the understanding, the better the service, the better the relationship, the better the outcomes. So the sort of MSL content that we're seeing, but I'd love to hear from you guys in the discussion what you think is the sort of content that might fit on a platform like this, that might provide insights and analytics, from scientific presentations to personalized discussion aids, talking papers, etc. So what can we learn from the commercial teams? This is a quote I use all the time when I'm talking to a brand team who are making content for reps. This is STEM healthcare data. But if you get it right with a sales aid, and forgive me, I'm going to talk sales aids and good sell outcomes just for a second, you can get a 71% improvement in good sell outcome. So what it's basically saying is that if you invest, and it's not a huge investment to move from something simple to something quite engaging, you see a 71% uplift in the outcomes from those engagements with a customer. So I'd like to think you could maybe translate that, or at least take something from that to say, maybe there's room here for more engaging interactive content for MSLs. Why not? This is where that data comes from, and I'm going to show it because I think if you remove the word good sell outcome and you think, and so I should say what a good sell outcome in STEM healthcare data, it's basically that at the end of the call, between the representative and the customer, they have agreed some behavioral change. So that might be to prescribe, to refer, etc. So that's what an MSL is setting out to do. There is some objective and you're looking for some behavioral change or support from the stakeholder, the key opinion leader, whoever it might be. So I think there is something we can take from this. What you're looking at on this chart is the red is no materials were used at all. It was just a chat. The gray is just paper. The pink is paper under glass, just swiping through the equivalent of static screens. Light green is there was some interaction from the rep. They maybe could have some thoughtful navigation, but the dark green is where there is some input from the customer and some input from the rep. And you can see if we move from the pink, which is a really simple flat piece, to there, we move from 21% of interactions had a positive outcome to 36%, and that's not insignificant at all. So this is where I'm getting at, is this is the point of having a good hard think about, is this the sort of content that will engage a customer? Really, really, really important in remote. The reason being is when an MSL is engaging with a stakeholder remotely, they're often only looking at a tiny, like I'm looking at Peter right now, a tiny little sort of headshot up here. I'm missing all the non-verbal cues, and it's a much more challenging interaction. So can we create content that encourages more interaction, more emotive dialogue? Now, if I had another 2 hours, I would take you through all of this, and I'm not going to. So you can start reading on, but it's not. When we start looking at how it is in a commercial team, these are the 4 pillars that we talk about, and there's a lot to consider, but they're all pretty simple and straightforward. I'd love to work with some of you guys on what in here is appropriate in the MSL medical field way. There are definitely things and principles that are, but I'm not going to go into them now. So I believe we have every opportunity to create high quality, emotive, interactive materials for MSLs. We can learn a lot from what's happened in commercial, from good and from bad, and that will help them deliver better, more impactful engagements with HCPs and stakeholders. And we can learn from that. We can get the data back and improve our content over time. So now I'm going to jump between sharing. I'm going to share live from my iPad, daring I know, some examples of functional content in the next sort of 5 to 10 minutes. Okay, so for those of you who've not seen it before, this is the iPad. This happens to be, you'll see because it's orange, the commercial CRM. If this was for the medical teams, it would be blue. I don't have an instance of that, but it's pretty much identical with some language changes. You don't see customer, you see stakeholder. Here's a list of all the customers that are in here, which are all fake in our sandbox. So this is, if you remember, this is the CRM sandbox, right? I can't do any damage in here. Here's my account. If I open up my account, I can start to see some interesting things. Now, again, just use your translation to think this commercial to medical. But I can see what emails have been sent. In fact, here's a better view. I can actually see all of my interactions with this stakeholder. So I can see if I've seen them. It won't be called a call report. It'll be called an interaction in medical. And I can look at that and I can see what was discussed. So I can see what slides were shown, etc. In fact, I can even go into a more in-depth view and see lots more information. I can have a look at the emails that were sent. Let's find an sent email there. I can even view it very briefly. In fact, I won't do that because it might be sensitive, etc. So this is where I will be going to understand more about the person I was about to see and engage with. So it's valuable regardless of what field team you're sitting in. But this is where the magic happens. These are the presentations. They're all HTML, CS. Well, they can be interactive PDFs or they can be essentially like web pages and fully interactive. And they could be scientific presentations, bunch of impact models. It could be population dynamics, etc. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you some examples on here. And the first ones I'm going to show you are the ones that are commercial. So forgive me, you're looking at this again, no MSL would use this, I agree. But this really illustrates the principles of a CRM, CLM in motion, done well. So I want you to imagine that you have a calcium bone replacement therapy, that you have a good dominance in the marketplace when it comes to adult, but you're getting a pediatrics license. So what you'd want to be doing with that product, and early on with MSLs, but once it's licensed, etc., for the reps, would be to understand how pediatrics is viewed by your customers. Now, you need to do that at a sort of head office, brand team, medical team level, but you also need to do that as an MSL. Because a conversation, I'm actually going to say as a rep and customer, because this is how this works, and it's not quite right. So if I was a rep and I was speaking to a customer, I was asking, from pigmented skin, new or pregnant mothers, pediatrics and elderly, how do you prioritize them in terms of treatment and resources? And a conversation with someone who said, I did a training, pediatrics training during my rotation. I run a clinic every third Thursday. That is an entirely different conversation to someone who says, I don't believe in it. They just need to drink more milk and get out there and see the sun, right? So the different conversations. So it will set up the rest of the conversation because you're understanding that person's needs. If I end up around here, that's quite good. But there's still another thing to ask, which is, okay, well, in that patient group, what percentage ends up in lifestyle advice versus, intent to treat or treat? So in the elderly, you'll probably see high treat, probably lowish here, lowish there, and maybe up here. Because again, if I've got a customer that prescribes a lot, I can be talking about the differences between this brand and the other, this product and the other. If they don't prescribe very much, then there's probably a job to do to talk about why medication might be important, why treatment is important. Then we have a look at the data and let's explore that data. Now, importantly, this is the information that I can get back. So you can imagine from a medical team point of view in head office, you could start to see trends across the country. You could start to highlight and see differences. And obviously, it's much more obvious from a brand team when you've got a lot more data coming in, how useful that would be. But you could also track that critical success factor of moving the importance of treating pediatrics up over time. And that's what the data and analytics can do. So I'm conscious of time, so I'm actually going to skip some of the other ones which are a bit more commercial and just show you some examples of some more creative ways to discover what's happening out there in terms of treatment. So this is a very heavily genericized version of something that was done in pediatrics in the ADHD space. So it has a Minecraft feel to it. It was used both out in the field by the medical team, but it was also used at conferences and congresses, and it was self-led by the clinician. And it's basically trying to understand the clinical pathway in terms of what is happening. And it's not going to make a lot of sense at this stage, but you can see how data was being collected in a non-threatening way, and people were building up the picture, etc. And I'll finish. But the main purpose here was they wanted to understand how quickly or how many steps there were to referral, because they needed to move that referral up because it was better for patients to be referred early. And let's be honest, it was better commercially for them to be referred early because they were a secondary care product. And in return for sharing this information, the clinicians using this were given in return how that compared to the national average, how it compared to the guidelines, etc. And it would build up that picture for them. Another way to look at that one here, and this isn't beautifully finished because it doesn't always have to be beautifully finished. For 3 or 4 people using it, it's different if you've got 50 or 60 reps out there. And again, it's been heavily genericized. It won't make a lot of a sense, but from a self-led, trying to get some information back from clinicians, again, it's very similar. You're building this up and you're starting to see what the referral pathway was for certain patient types, and then you can switch between patients and find out what's going on to get those comparisons, etc. So just a few examples. How we think, yes, we're okay. Right. So I'm actually going to now show you a couple of real things here. Market access, important. Jump to this one here. If you're trying to help someone in the CCG or a clinical directorate to build a picture of what's happening in their directorate in terms of the costs, etc., or the opportunities, then this is a number of different drug comparisons that can be done. And what I'm trying to say here is the stuff that you can get out there on the iPad is as interactive and as involved and engaging as you can or want to make it. There's almost nothing we can't do on here. So here we're building up this profile of drug 1 in the transplant, and we can go as far as what the estimated average mass in kilos are. Essentially, you get the idea that basically together you're getting input from it's a discussion guide, if you like, based around the values. And then finally, you'll get all of the information that's needed. Now, the beauty of Veeva is this is then held in the system, or not, if that's decided that's too much in GDPR and that's not what we want. But what we can also do is take this content and inject it into an email that the MSL can then send to that customer as a reference. So you're not only able to do dynamic content like this and create and calculate, but you can then share that with the customer all in system, and then follow what they do with that content in terms of opening the email. Here's a nice example of, again, a discussion guide. This was for actually more of a public affairs. It was around opioids and opioid misuse and getting more funding. And you can see here, if we open up and select a country, we'll select the UK. This is opioid misuse. Nice and big, and there's no reason it can't be big and vibrant, etc. Just so you can see the stats and you can talk it through. You'll see at the top there's nice ways to jump around, but importantly, we're recording what's being discussed, not recording the words, but where people go, because we want to see where the interest lies. What data in here is the most important? And in fact, we can go further than that. Let's compare ourselves to good old, let's do the Netherlands. We can do a head-to-head on this one as well. So you're starting to be able to do that comparison. And as you can imagine, this went down well in a conference, in a congress, because people were seeing the comparisons in the different countries. So really dynamic functional content that's providing a lot of insights. And I'll finish, because I'm conscious of time, on the one that I'm most proud of at the moment, which we were given permission to genericize. It's about data exploration. So in this, there is a whole range of studies that have come out for this particular product. There would only all be live, but I've taken them all out in case I press the wrong button and reveal anything. And then we've genericized study C. So here's the study design, which is always good to discuss through and talk about. And then we've even got all of the background information, should it be needed, more of an objection handler than it is a discussion. Where it really gets really interesting is it's been designed so that you can start a conversation, but let it flow. Unlike a sales conversation where we want to be kind of prescriptive, but prescriptive for the right different customers. Here it's about seeing what's available to talk about. So if I look at the clinical outcomes, these are all designed to see what information I can explore. And it's real data visualization. This is not screenshots that have been linked together. This is actual on-the-fly data representation. So whatever it might be that we're looking at over the time. And you can see I can deploy all of these so that we can talk about what data is available to discuss, what's of interest to the clinician. And I've got to remember where this is in the PROs. You can occasionally get creative. Yes, here it is. Not always. Some MSLs and some medical teams want to keep it down low, but here, on the down low, I should say, but here, it's about as creative as we've got on here. I quite like this visualizations. Again, just looking at it over time, you can see the week climbing, etc. So it's just interesting to sometimes visualize data, less as charts, something more interesting. So I think based on time, I'm going to end it there, Peter. And I could go on for hours, but I won't. What I'd be really interested to hear from people in the audience from the Q&A is what sort of content they are currently thinking about or have created, or where the opportunities lie.
Thank you. Okay, thank you, James. That was great. Again, lots of content there. So we've only we need to get this to a couple of minutes, so we need to be a little bit quick here, guys. But if there's anyone in the audience who would like to pop some questions into the chat rooms and text boxes, again, that would be great. Just picking up on what Catherine said, but I suppose one of the things when I look at something like this, I think, you know, there's a bit of a danger. We look at a specific example and then think, can you do something? But actually, you could do all sorts of things with all of this stuff, couldn't you? I mean, you know, you're talking about MSLs, which is a good example, but could be nothing to do with MSLs. It could just be Congress, HCPs at Congress or something, you know, filling in this stuff on a form or all sorts of different things. But it's the principles and the engagement which is interesting, and what you can do knowing that engagement is happening. Catherine was just asking a quick question about whether the interactive activities are done by HCPs independently or together with the field rep / MSL / whatever. But I guess the answer is it could be either and or sort of thing.
Correct. There's a function in Veeva called Veeva Engage for Portals, which is self-led detailing, or self-led learning. So yeah, it can be both. So yeah, Catherine, it can be either or, but as we know, you know, being led by a facilitated conversation is all the more effective. Can I just address Louise's comment? I actually stumbled over my words there. I couldn't agree more with you, Louise. That what I kind of meant is it's a bit more led by the rep than by the customer, but they should be definitely free flowing. I just stumbled over my words when I was talking about that. The principles I always follow is it's vital to assess your customer. You then need some mechanism to thoughtfully align the content you've got to that assessment. And then you in commercial terms, ask for the business, or in MSL terms, agree an outcome based upon those assessed needs and the data you've discussed. So yeah, it was wrong of me to say.
Okay. And just coming back to the context that we're talking about this in terms of Veeva and so on. What intrigues me is that sort of analytics opportunity and the sort of, you know, you can gather this information. And am I oversimplifying or being stupid here? But you're sort of, you know, you're running your project. It doesn't matter if it's an MSL or a rep or whoever. I don't care. But the point is, you've got this engagement with somebody. They're doing something. You're gathering the data. It's sort of coming back into this Veeva ecosystem. And I think you said there's then the opportunity to go, well, look, that set of slides or something can be tweaked in this way or that way, and you can refresh it. You can do a slightly different thing. And again, within an ecosystem, you know, without going too far in this direction, but you know, the tools are there for you to sort of play with and bring in maybe some different references or whatever. I mean, that is interesting, isn't it? And I suppose it's just a stupid general question. And because of the last year or so, I mean, one just speculates that there's been a massive acceleration in people grasping all this sort of stuff and seeing those benefits. And are people actually seeing those benefits? And are they doing something as a result of that? Maybe that's a stupid question at the end. What is happening as a result of that?
So we wouldn't be in business if everyone was doing it well, right? It's our job to help people optimize platforms like Veeva. And I would say people are using maybe 10 to 20% of the potential that's there. And I would say it's way less than that in the field medical side.
Right.
But to your point about that data, you know, what we're starting to see, so especially for MSLs, what I see is this huge amount of content they can get. But how do we help them know and assess what's the most relevant content at the right time for the right stakeholder, and where that stakeholder is on their adoption ladder or journey? So we're seeing now, and this is really encouraging, is there's also a function which is really powerful in Veeva called Veeva Surveys. Really simple setup, almost no cost to set it up. But you can build that into the discussion with the customer or with the stakeholder, which then helps you type them. So in commercial world, we talk about segmentation, but it's just understanding that customer. And then you're quite right, Peter, you can then surface content that's most appropriate to that. So we know that some people are far more led by peer review, Congress outcomes, whereas others are more patient orientated, etc. And so just like our experience on the web, where, you know, our data is being collected and we are served different content, you and I look at different things when we search for Google, because it is attempting to know us, and this is a more sanitized version of that, and content is really the driver for that for me, by understanding what they've consumed and what they like. But we can go further with surveys and, you know, understanding those customers.
Okay, and I think I am going to wrap this up in a moment, but one of the, I mean, and it probably won't work very well here, but if I was in a room full of MedComms people and I could see them and look them in the eyes, I'd probably say something like, being a little bit cynical. I mean, MedComms agency folk don't get terribly involved in some of this stuff, or traditionally haven't. You produce a product, a monograph, a slide set, or whatever, and it goes out there. And I know we've been talking about it for a long time. You've been talking about it for a long time. Again, the acceleration of last year, more and more MedComms people are talking to me. In fact, I had a conversation the other day about how can we deal with the analytics side of it. There's an interest there, I think, in trying to understand what the point of this deliverable is. What does it do? Does it change behavior? Does it have a result, and so on? And I think the more that MedComms, if I can put my stake on, my sort of soapboxy bit here, if MedComms can just grasp more of the opportunities of this sort of thing, I think we will all do a lot better at what we're trying to do. Does that make some sense?
It absolutely does. And I think you've just created a perfect segue to what John's going to be talking about next, because
okay.
there's a big change coming, and it's modular digital publishing. So this is where your pre-approved components of content, and I won't steal John's thunder on this, are created early in that brand product molecule by agencies like are on this call right now, rather than the creative agency at the end. And then those components will be drawn into and utilized in different channels and different content. So I say absolutely that the MedComms community needs to be thinking about this, because I won't call it a land grab, but we're moving down a different route, which is, instead of everything being recreated every time by different agencies, there will be kind of like a central repository of content that's pulled into websites, that's pulled into sales aids, etc. So there's going to be a change coming, and I think in a session like this, where you're really looking forward in that, and the session that John's about to run, I think will speak to that.
Excellent. Okay. On that note, I'm going to say a huge thank you to you. I know you're very happy to hear from people. If anybody wants to reach out to you, either in the audience today or watch the video, LinkedIn is the easy way of doing it, or you've put your emails up earlier on anyway. But please do, anybody watching this, contact James and have a chat about this stuff, because I think there's huge amounts that we could, as a MedComms community, be doing to exploit it. So thank you very much, James. As always, just a little wave. We'll say goodbye and take care. So wave on that note. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Oh,